Now here's the guy who started it all, John DeVita.
Well, thank you very much, Rich. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Meet the Chicago Historians from your Stella Seed Community Center on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich on Monday, August the 6th, the year 2018. Today we are doing a tape remote broadcast from the Estelle Seed Community Center at 4000 North Ozark Avenue in Norwich, Illinois. The panel will be talking about football in Chicago and much more. So sit back and enjoy Meet the Chicago Historians. And now to start today's broadcast, here's our announcer, Mr. Richard Lang.
And now here's our panel moderator, Tom McKenna. Tom?
All right. Welcome, everyone. I am normally not the moderator. Our moderator, I was just informed as I walked through the door, is on his way to the hospital. So unfortunately, we'll have an update on his condition. That would be John Ryan, my lifelong friend. We are going to start the program today the way we normally start the program. We are going to go around the table. We are going to introduce ourselves to let everyone that's listening to us know who is here, who is participating today. I'm Tom McKenna, a retired Chicago police officer, a lifelong friend of our moderator, John Ryan, one of the few people who will actually admit to that. To my left.
Am I in your left?
Uh-oh.
I hate to say that, being on the left.
The left of anything.
Bill Kugelman. I'm a retired fire chief from Chicago Fire Department and president of the union, Firefighters Union. I have been here with John for years and years and years. And what more can I say? We're having a good time. To my left.
Andy Ronstadt, a village resident for 35 years, retired from the road construction industry. Do many of the various volunteer work for the village on the zoning board, and that's really about it.
And I'm your announcer, Rich Schlang. I've got a background teaching modern American and European history, more involved lately with Chicago history, and I'm also involved with a group that recreates old-time radio shows.
Well, I can only tell you, you guys are way too qualified for me. I'm not sure why I'm at this meeting, but this is Jim Mora. I'm currently the president of the village of Norwich, a great place to live. To my left.
I'm Rich Massaro, longtime resident, and actually, I believe I actually have a title in the village. I am the Village of Norwich Historical Coordinator. So I'm at the Estelle Seed Center 2 days a week from 8 to 3:30. We open the museum, and obviously open to the public. Beautiful facility that has been given to us by the Village of Norwich, and we have 2 parts of the museum, military as well as village history. And to my left.
Thank you, Rich. I'm Dennis Fitzgerald, a retired Chicago policeman for 33 years, and a resident of this northwest side since 1951. I find myself in very good company today. As Tommy McKenna opened up, I know he and I are proud members in the past of the Emerald Society Bagpipe Band, which was founded back in 1982 on the premise of honoring our fallen, and we play for the police, the funerals of policemen, firemen killed in the line of duty. Retirement has held several things for me, and I'm currently proud to say that I head up the Knights of Columbus Police Council. You know, it's 135 years old, the Knights of Columbus, with 15,000 councils, but there's only one police council, and that's here in Chicago, and that's what I head up. And to my left is
Back again, all the way around the table, back to me, Tom McKenna. Okay, before we get into the meat of the discussion here today, I know we are going to be talking about Chicago football, but we usually start the program off. Current events. This is going to be a very interesting program today. We have so much history to talk about, especially here in Norwich. But before we start, Jim, I'm referring to the president of Norwich, Jim. May I call you Jim?
Sure.
Jim, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, but I moved to the northwest side of Chicago about 5 years ago. Since I've been on the northwest side, I've had the chance to shop in the beautiful village of Norwich. I've noticed that it's been prospering. I noticed that it's relatively crime-free. I know that the citizens of Norwich are very happy living here. So here's my question, Jim. Would you consider using my Chicago address and running for the mayor of the city of Chicago?
Please say yes, Jim.
We need your help. You don't have to answer right now.
Oh no, I'll give you an answer.
Oh, okay, here we go. Wait, should I? I've got my.
Tom, they do not pay that mayor enough to do what he's trying to do, and we are surrounded by Chicago. But I'll tell you something, we're a lot different than Chicago. We're a very peaceful village where people live 30, 40, 50 years, and we're very, very proud of it. And thank you for your compliments and everything else. And we're going to move forward in the village of Norwich. We got some other things moving, and I think everybody will be very happy.
So I should take that to mean I should call the printer and stop the nominating petitions? Is that correct?
Tom, you do whatever you would like to
You're spoken like a true politician. You're leaving all your options open.
That's right.
Okay. So Ram at this point has nothing to worry about from being invaded from the village of Norwich.
No, from what I hear out there is Ram has a lot to be worried about. He's got a lot of people wanting his job, and his job right now, people are not very happy with him and the police chief. And that's probably unfortunate because I think they work very hard in what they do. I don't know what else they could do. People said, well, hire more police. They did. You know, it's a difficult situation in Chicago right now.
Well, you know, it's funny you mentioned the village in the location. You know, Chicagoans traveling around the country and around the world, we always are a little bit offended by people that don't actually live in the city of Chicago saying they're from Chicago, because it's much easier to say I'm from Chicago than then have to explain where you are. I know a friend of mine, he owns a Italian restaurant in Las Vegas called Chicago Joe's. Very excellent restaurant, close to downtown. If you ever get a chance, stop there. And I asked him the first time I met him, I said, where are you from originally? And he said, Melrose Park. And I said, so Chicago Joe's? He says, yeah, well, it's much easier calling it Chicago Joe's than Melrose Park Joe's. We are going to get into a little bit of history about the village of Norwich. Again, being offended by people not from Chicago saying they're from Chicago, I'm not the least bit offended from someone from Norwich saying that you're from Chicago, because you actually are inside the city of Chicago. So feel free to say you're from Chicago. Doesn't offend me one bit.
Tom, I'm from Norwich.
Okay.
And Tom, we won't be offended if you say you're from Norwich.
All right. Well, sometimes I might have to go that route. Let me go to Rich just for a second. Could you just tell us a little bit about the history of the village and?
Well, you know, I'm the gentleman who's sitting to my right is the fifth mayor of the village of Norwich, and we've been in the business of we've been a village for 70 years. stability is the hallmark of Norwich, I would say. The first mayor was a gentleman by the name of Kuchar, who was our least long-serving mayor. He did not serve out one term. He was succeeded by Joe Sieb, who, if you've lived in the area and know anything about Norwich, was, I think, mayor for 50 years. Joe was succeeded by a good man by the name of Oilfield, Rano Pedicano, and then Jim Shimura. And what I would say about the village of Norwich in terms of at least the people who've headed the village, I didn't know, I mean Mayor Kuchar was here before I was even born, but all of those people who served in that capacity, in my mind, as somebody who's lived here basically their whole life, were the right people for the job. And I think because of that type of leadership, we've had stability. And I think you mentioned it before. You walk into Norwich, there's no crime, there's prosperity. It's a great thing, and I think our mayors have had a lot to do with that. So,
yeah. Excuse me, Tom, where did the name Norwich come from?
I believe it was Jim. I don't know if you know. I think it was a hybrid. They combined Norwood Park Township and maybe
Park Ridge.
Park Ridge.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
That's exactly where it came from, and the previous historian, he tutored me on that one day.
Myron, yes, yeah.
Who Myron knew a lot.
Yes, yeah.
Going back to what Rich said, I didn't know the first mayor, but I worked with Joe. I worked with Oilfield, Rana Pedicano, myself. And the one thing I know about all of us, the one common factor, we all love Norwich. And when you love something, you work hard for it because you don't want anything to happen to it. And I think that from Joe Sieb to Oilfield, Rana Pedicano, and myself, I mean, we all love Norwich. It's real simple. Many of us grew up here. I have 40 years in here. I know Rana Pedicano, he grew up here. So I think that's part of the stability that Rich is talking about, that if you come to a community and you're a politician, which I never consider myself a politician, I consider myself a resident taking care of the village at this point until the next person. The point being is that I want to leave it in better shape than the previous guy, and I think that's where they came from too. And so far we've been, I think, pretty successful.
It shows, Jim.
Right. Jim, I said earlier as I'm driving around, again, I live close to Norwich, but in the city of Chicago, but I see a great deal of economic development here along Harlem, in Montrose. What do you think? I mean, did they come to you? Did you go to them? Is it a combination of?
Well, that property lay dormant for a long time, 10 maybe years, maybe 12. If everyone remembers, in their younger days, we used to have the old show, and the show was the first one with the seats that came back. So it was like a lazy boy chair, but that was years and years ago. Well, when that closed, that whole property really became desolate. So what I did was I put a couple of developers together to show them that the location was this and this and this, and they agreed. And at one time, that property, I believe, sold for $23 or $25 million, and you were not going to get anywhere close to that money today. So now that the price did drop, the developers became interested. And with a little help from the village, they now, I think once they get done with everything, because right now we have the AMC show, we have Miller's, We have some things going in the middle. And we have Chick-fil-A coming.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Where are they going to be?
Chick-fil-A will be east of the show toward Harlem.
Nice.
Yeah, so...
Great food.
Yeah, we're building, it's number one in the chicken business.
Yeah, it is.
So what happens is, on a property like this, you build. I was involved in a deal that bought Target here in 2002. And then when the Harlem Irving wanted to expand to where Red Robin is and everything else, I was involved in that negotiation too. Why? I don't mind throwing out a couple of dollars at the beginning, knowing that if they're there 20 or 30 years, we're going to get it back 10, 12 times. Because basically the village of Norwich is run by sales tax. If you saw any of our real estate tax bills, you'd be shocked. Because if you compare them with Chicago, they're very reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's taxes. That's one of the things that are really killing well, it's not just the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, taxes. So what do you, Jim? What do you do? I mean, what's your philosophy on being able to run a village like Norwich and keep the taxes low when everyone around you is raising taxes? Because again, are you sure you don't want to run for mayor of Chicago? I'm asking. That's the last time I'm going to ask.
I'll email you on that.
Okay.
What we tried to do in the village is, since the sales tax is what the sales tax, which was basically, sales tax was the Harlem Irving Plaza. And that's all we had, and at that time it was sufficient. But we found that things were costing more. So when we bought in Target, Target probably is the biggest sales tax revenue we get. Now we have an expansion under the mall. We have Panera, Red Robin. Don't ask me about the mattress place. That drives me crazy. But Nordstrom's is doing fantastic over there, Nordstrom Rack. And then we move down to the other property. And the other property, when all is said and done, we'll be able to say that whatever we're losing in sales, because we're losing sales tax because of the fact that people are using their computers to order. Okay. So Carson's has gone out, and Carson's was a big revenue for us. So we're working with the mall now on ideas and how they're going to fill those 3 floors. But my discussions with them the other day was very interesting, and that is to get around the computer sales. You can either open up Portillo's and Bona Beefs and that, because people have to come pick up their food, so they're going to pay it there. That's good. That's a small nickel and dime. What we're seeing is that you get discount stores come in, such as Nordstrom Rack. Nobody orders that online. They go there and they go, oh, this fits me, and it's 50% off. So you get them into the mall. And I think that's what the owner of Harlem Irving is looking at, that we just found another niche on how we can do it. So to keep up, it's hard to keep up with the taxes, because what's happened is the state of Illinois, those friggin' crooks that they are, and I don't care if this is taped or not, because they passed a bill just to take like 0.2% of our sales tax, which is a lot of money, which might mean a couple 100,000, which means 5 or 6 police cars, whatever. I put things into asset categories. So they did that. And then we got the clowns over at the Cook County who want to put the sugar tax in and shut down
Don't sugarcoat it, Jim. You got something to say it.
I didn't get elected sugarcoating anything.
Right.
These guys will tell you that. I say what I got to say. You got to remember, I've been here since '98. I was the financial director. I watched us go up and down. But I don't mind if they create something, but they don't create anything, Cook County, and neither does the state of Illinois. All they do is pass a law and take more revenue from us because we've been good souls and have a balanced budget and have a couple of nickels and dimes in a bank, they want it. Well, screw you. Go figure out what your problems are, which are many, believe me. And it doesn't make no difference whether it's Rauner or Pritzker, and it doesn't make no difference because as long as Madigan's there, he's going to run the show. And that's just how it's been. In fact, I'm not embarrassed to say this. Madigan tried to beat me twice out here and back my opponent. Now, why would he want to do that? Because he wants control. He wants jobs. He wants contracts. That's the thing that's wrong with this state. Everybody owes everybody, or everybody wants to do everybody a favor, so you might not think out of the box. You want to think, okay, I better help this guy out. And that's part of the problem. We all have to start standing on our own. And that's the problem. And many villages are doing it. I'm proud of a lot of those villages. But Cook County and them, I mean, you tell me, what were they thinking with the sugar tax? Tell me.
Yeah, that worked out real well, didn't it?
No.
I liked when they were going to repeal the tax, which they did, rightfully so, and Preckwinkle made the statement, well, if that tax gets repealed, we're going to have to lay people off. Well, that's kind of how it works, isn't it?
Well, that's, Tommy, you hit it right in the head. And Preckwinkle is a typical politician who's been around many, many years and has friends all over the place. And that's why the state of Illinois is in the position that it is. I mean, right now, the Springfield, they can't pay their pension benefits. They can't do it.
Right, and it seems the only, I like when a politician says, well, we had no alternative but to raise taxes. That would be the equivalent of someone walking into their boss and saying, you know what, boss, I've been going over my finances and I'm just not, the salary you pay me just isn't cutting it, so there's only one alternative. You're going to have to give me a raise.
Right.
Yeah, well, there's another alternative, before I tell you to get out of my office, is to cut your expenses. So obviously, Jim, you know how to do it here
Well, we're doing a better job of it, but it's getting tougher because of what I said about the sales tax. But to give you a little story, Earl Field was the mayor, and I worked for Earl for 9 years. And Earl was always a very, very nice man, and he was always a very generous man. He had someone come in his office, I think it was a woman, I'm not quite sure, but she said, I need more money because I need to get a new car and I want to get an Escalator or whatever it is. And I guess Earl said, what's wrong with a Chevy? But she wanted an Escalade. So Earl said, you know what we're going to do? And I was sitting there when he said it. I'm going to give you 2 weeks. You go home, put your best dress on, and you go out there and knock on doors and take some interviews, and if you get a better job, I'm going to throw a party for you. And when you don't find that better job and better benefit, then come on back and talk. So, you know, that's how that's very similar to what you just said, Tom.
I assume that you all watch TV, and that ad that's on there with Madigan, the latest one, is really top-notch. Top-notch.
Which one, is that the one with the governors of other states? Or?
No, well, that one is...
Oh, that was a Rauner commercial, right?
Yeah, and this is also a Rauner commercial where they say that Mike Madigan is the worst politician in the country or something like that. And they keep playing it over and over and over again, so this next election will be very interesting to see what's going on.
Well,
Jim, I was down in Springfield a lot. I was president of the fire union in Chicago, and I was never so glad to be away from there as I am now.
Oh, yeah, it's,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor and gentlemen, I like, you're talking about sales taxes and different things in that nature. I have a summer home up in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, which is 15 miles north of Lake Geneva. For the past 4 years, my real estate tax, and I own a lot of property up there. Takes me 3.5 hours to cut the grass on the riding mower, so you can tell how much property I've got up there. For the past 4 years, my property tax has gone down. Has gone down. Not much, but it has gone down. Yesterday, I said to my sister, who lives up there, I says, Eileen, I have to go to Walmart to do my shopping because I had to leave up there and get, so I've been here on time to do this program. She says, you're picking a right day to do that. The weekend, starting at 12 o'clock midnight Saturday until 12 o'clock midnight last night, you buy something in the state of Wisconsin, there was absolutely no sales tax. Nothing. So people were buying televisions and they were buying computers and buying all stuff because there was no sales tax. Now you can imagine that happening here in Illinois. Oh my God. Especially here in Cook County. It's disgusting. I mean, and the sales tax up there in Wisconsin is 5.50%.
I was going to say, we'd all be moving to Wisconsin.
I tell you, and gentlemen,
Illinois is losing people. Yep.
gentlemen, you go up Route 12 after you get out of Richmond. You go on Route 12, the freeway going up. That's how I go. The building industry up there is booming. It's booming. Wherever you look, there's homes going up. Even out on Lauderdale Lake, they're building a lot of homes up there. Even in a little subdivision where I live, Lake Wandawega, there's 3-4 homes going up. Over. Farmlands are starting to dwindle away because now our farmers are not going to be able to sell their crops to our other countries, and these guys need money, so they're going to sell their property to builders so they can build homes.
and that's why people move to Nevada and Florida, because there's no state sales tax.
Jim,
There's not.
as a matter of fact, I was just going to bring that up. My daughter, one of my daughter's son-in-law and 3 of my grandkids, they just moved from Illinois to Nevada. The company that he works for has a plant out in Nevada, and he worked for one here in Illinois. By moving from the state of Illinois to the state of Nevada, he got a 4.9% pay increase because there's no state income tax.
Whatever the state income tax was here, he got that as an
Right.
increase.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what happens. Now, there was rumors that these brain surgeons that we have in Springfield, they were going to start to tax benefits, pensions, Social Security. Well, how fast do they want us all to get out of here?
Yeah, right. It's
I mean,
almost
think about that.
Or the service tax that's been talked about.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
But I mean,
yeah.
if you're getting between your Social Security and maybe if you had a little 401k and you got a pension, let's say you got 60, 70,000 coming in, and that's 5%. That's a lot of money.
Sure is.
So maybe you and the wife don't go to Blossoms or one of the places a week, and then they wonder why the economy's going down, because they're sucking up all the tax dollars, which I wouldn't mind if I knew where it went. I'm still not sure.
all right. Well, the way we usually do this program is we do it in half-hour segments. So we're coming up on one of our breaks right at the moment.
Right. Now, for a brief intermission, you've been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians, and we thank you for it. We'll be right back.
This is like a half hour, we get a break.
Pain? Do you know someone that has constant pain? of their low back, neck,
In my
shoulder,
office, I
knee,
take a nap.
or wrist? Have they tried medications, exercise, physical therapy, or chiropractic, and nothing seemed to make it better? Well, I may have your answer. Why not try a napropath? Hi everybody, this is Dr. Wayne Chickowitz, and I've been practicing 30 years treating pain. I'm board certified and hold a diplomate in pain management. For your convenience, we have 2 locations. In Cicero, 3602 South 61st Avenue, 708-656-7000, or in Villa Park at 122 West St. Charles Road, Suite 1A, 630-833-4007. Why not try a napropath and stop the pain today?
Now back to our special edition of Meet the Chicago Historians. Tom?
Well, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for staying tuned. We're back with the same panel. Let's start this off with, we're going to continue along the political lines. Jim, term limits. You hear the term of term limits being thrown around a lot. What are your feelings? What do you think?
I think all the offices should have a reasonable term limit. You don't want to make it too short because you want to be able to have that person put some policies in place. But like down in Springfield, those guys have been there way, way too long.
Are there any term limits in Norwich right now? For your
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Not that I know of.
So the voters have to decide.
The voters decide, and I always thought that maybe like the mayor's position should be 8 years or 12 years.
As in most cities.
As a term limit, only because new ideas, you should get new ideas in there. You also should maybe get that person away from that place because not me, because I don't make deals. I don't make no deals. People come in and, they'll tell me stuff like, I voted for you, I'm Polish. And I said, okay, that's great. Now what do you want? So my point is that if you have the right person in there, he probably can be in there for many years and not hurt the situation.
As Mr. Sieb must have been a long time.
Mr. Sieb was one of a kind. One of a kind, believe me. I have had a couple dealings with him when he was alive, and he put me on a pension board. He said with my financial background and everything else, I'd be a good fit. So I went to a number of the meetings, and then he calls me in. And he says, Shma, I put you on that pension board, and your brain's gone to mush. So here I am staring at him. He gets up with Don Namitz and Joanne Wheeler, 2 other trustees. They leave for lunch. I'm sitting in his office by myself. That's Joe Sieb.
He never held back.
No, he didn't.
My feelings on term limits, I think it's a good idea, but I really don't, I'm not comfortable with them being etched in stone because like you said, Jim, if you get someone that's really good in the position, maybe the term limits with a public referendum attached to them that, hey, if you like this guy, let's say he's been mayor for, let's say 2 terms, public referendum for the citizens of whatever electoral district he's from, to public referendum to say, hey, let's give this guy another 2 terms or whatever. I'd be comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with throwing somebody out of office just because,
The date came along.
Yeah, the date came along.
Well, we had this argument in Local 2, and this was quite a few years ago when I was a steward, and you know, the arguments were pro and con. If some guys would say, well, listen, you know, we got that guy in there, we want to keep him in there. We don't want to get rid of him. And yet another guy would say, well, hey, vote. You vote him out. You know, let him in there, but vote him out if you don't like him. It didn't, you know, like I say, there was all pro and con. We did come up with term limits, so 2 terms, and it was only 6 years. In some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad. You know, not bad, but
You know,
not really good.
Again, sticking along the politics discussion, I just thought of something that was kind of interesting. Dennis and I are both retired Chicago police officers.
We forgive you for that.
That's right.
Thanks,
Roger.
Roger.
Roger McAuliffe, who was a Chicago police officer, who I was living on the South Side when the legislature wasn't convened in Springfield. Roger used to work at the police gym, and I always used to say to him, you know, I can't vote for you, but I still support you. And I just thought of something funny. Now, when I moved up here, his son, and I believe his son represents Norwich, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
And now I don't know if you supported him or you didn't support him, but I just thought it was interesting that I couldn't vote for his father, but now I can vote for his son, which I have. I don't know what your feelings are about Mike, but I think he's a pretty good man.
I think Mike's a straight shooter. He's always been, and if he can do something for the towns that he represents, he'll do them.
Yeah.
All right. He's been there probably close to 20 years.
Yeah. His father
So-
was in for a long time too.
Getting back to your example, you were talking about someone who's good, leave them in, and someone who's bad. The problem is here. The person that's good, that's easy to leave them in. That's easy. The guy who's bad, if you can't get him out, boy, that's going to be tough.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why I ran the last 2 times, because the people who wanted to run were not here for the right reasons. I felt that way, my opinion, and obviously the people did too.
Right.
So,
Let's just for a second, let's switch back to the history of Norwich, since we have some people here that I'm sure are very knowledgeable. Did the city of Chicago ever think about or petition to incorporate Norwich into the city?
they tried a long time ago when Joe Sieb was mayor.
And because there are so many areas, I believe there's Mount Greenwood on the southwest side, that was separate, they incorporated. There was a lot of areas that did incorporate into the city of Chicago. Well, what do you think? What was the reason? Good decision, or bad? Well, obviously
the
for you, but-
reason why they couldn't do it is because Joe was a very smart man, and he made us what we call home rule, which means that anything that would have to go through would probably be a referendum, and it wouldn't be a referendum of Chicago people, it would be of Norwich. It's never going to pass. And Chicago just wanted their hands on Harlem Irving Plaza.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
It's interesting because a number of suburbs wanted to become part of Chicago. The big arguments: police protection, fire protection, Chicago water. So it looks like your early settlers out here had that independent streak. They didn't want to do that. They probably came from bad city neighborhoods and wanted to stay out of Chicago jurisdiction.
well, Ram, when he came in, he tried to take the water rates, because he supplies all the suburbs, like you
Right.
said, most of them.
For price, yeah.
So he tried to charge the Chicago residents, let's say $5, and he was going to charge the suburbs $7. And everybody said, wait a minute, it's the same water, what are we talking about? We all took him to court, the suburbs, and the judge told him you cannot discriminate. So went back to the $5, and that's where we're at. So Rom's been trying things all along, so
I'm shocked.
I know. I can see.
Our man. Let's switch to the second. Rich, we're here in the community center, but I'm looking along the wall here, and I see the Norwich Village Museum, and I also see the Norwich Veterans Museum. Tell us a little bit about what you got here and why people should stop in, because I've driven by this many times, didn't even know this was here. So, what have you got?
You know, I'm not the one who set this up. It was a group of people, the way I understand it, who set it up. And in my opinion, they did a great job. What we have in the Veterans Museum is, I believe, the oldest piece that we have dates to the Spanish-American War. And then the most recent pieces that we have are from the Vietnam War. Right now, I'm talking to a former classmate of mine whose brother is one of our 5 killed in action in Vietnam, and hopefully soon we'll get his dress blues, and that will be a nice addition for the military part of the museum to represent the Vietnam era. And the Village Museum, whoever did this really did a great job, because we have all pertinent groups to the village represented. We have everything from village government to the fire department, the police department, Little League, the Highlighters, which was a drum and bugle corps that was here. We have objects representing, I can remember seeing some of these things in my grandmother's basement, you know, the old washboards, and so we have physical objects that just represent advances in history, if you want to call it that. You know, technologically, maybe that would be the way I would put it. So we have just in this small amount of space we have, they cover the entire spectrum and did a really good job. So it's not a huge place to see. You could come in. I've had people, though, literally come here and spend an hour. You know, people who maybe were residents who moved out, came back, wanted to see it, and really poked around in there for a good hour. So
photos that you have, sure.
Yeah, actually, Joanna Scupian, who is our village manager at the there's 3, I should say, large books in there that have pictures of and articles from various points of the village. When Joanna was in high school and part of the, I'm going to forget the name of the club, but they put the students were part of putting the book together. I always said if this whole place burned down, the 3 things I would save were those books, because a lot of our history, you know, articles from papers, pictures of various kinds are in those books, so it would be at least a good starting point. But my compliments to the people who set this thing up. They did a great job.
Oh, yeah,
and it's worthwhile for anybody to come in and see.
I've driven by many times. I didn't know it was here, so anyone that's listening, stop in. Very impressive.
Yep.
You know, getting back, we touched on it, the HIP as it's referred to now, but I don't know when that actually switched to the HIP. Well, everybody, the kids called it the HIP, but the Harley Murphy Shopping Center. When did that go in, and was that the first major shopping center in the United States?
I don't know if it was the first one, but it's about 60 plus years old.
60, really?
Right. And like I said, Michael Marchese's family, who started it, they have done an incredible job of surviving. When you go to these other villages, you can see big storefronts, nothing in there.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of major shopping centers that have closed. I know in the southeast side of Chicago, in Indiana, there was a huge shopping center there that closed. A lot of them have a lot of empty space, Fort City and the south side of Chicago.
Yeah, they're basically 97% full.
Wow.
So that means that's pretty good when you talk a couple hundred stores that they have in that mall. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Jim, I remember in the early days of the Harlem Plaza when it opened up, and on the rooftop they had these teen dances, or these sock hops or teen dances with entities like Dick Biondi, and it was quite the thing. And it's a compliment to Norwich and their ability for innovation and all that, in the stores that were there. I remember as kids, we had gone into, I think it was a Woolworths or something, but it lent itself more like a Walgreens type of thing.
Dennis, this isn't a shoplifting story, is it? Because we're going to be, we are recorded. Just so you know, I don't want any arrests made there.
No, Tommy, you'll enjoy this here. So they had a soda fountain there, and I said to my friend, we were very young, I said, let's get something to drink. So we got up there, and we just ordered a couple of waters. But I had these tablets. They were like an Alka-Seltzer, but they were flavored. So root beer, strawberry, and they
Fizzies. Fizzies, yeah.
Fizzies.
I remember.
Oh, fizzies, yeah. So we put them in the water, and of course the employees looking at us, and we're just enjoying our flavored drink. They didn't invite us back, needless to say, but a lot of good memories in those early years, how Norwich evolved, and the old Kittyland Park, and they had the horses you could ride, and a lot of good memories.
Sure.
Yeah, one nice supplement to this museum here as far as local history, one of the entrances to the HIP, the Harlem Irving Plaza, has a nice decade by decade study of the growth of the HIP. And some of us, maybe I'm the only one here that can remember, the HIP is only a strip mall anchored by a Kroger in the 50s. And you get this decade by decade story of growth of the HIP.
Very good.
Yeah. And getting back to the historical part, since we've been doing the renovating, I'd send Public Works out and say, go get that sign. Go get this sign. And I know they probably think I'm nuts, but they're the signs that will remember the old theater. They're the signs that are the marquee that was in the front. And right now I'm going to try to work on getting them to give us that furniture sign up there, the one that's on a ball.
City.
Furniture City.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, we had them at one of our meetings. Very nice gentlemen. So they're gonna keep the sign because they have like a cigar thing, but it's like a ball up there, and maybe I can get that thing down. And when we do get more room, we'll be able to show some more of this, because history isn't just back 10, 20 years ago. It's going forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's still going forward.
Right.
And I probably picked most of that up watching that show called The Pickers.
Right, oh yeah.
You know, I watched
That's an interesting show.
Yeah, I watch it all the time, and I get from there, and I said, you know what? So I had the public work, and I know they're probably in their trucks going, this guy's nuts. What does he want this for? Well, they now figured it out. They got it all.
Well, that's a
sorted.
great idea. You know, out in Las Vegas, they have an area, I don't know if it's the closest
Yes.
downtown. Yeah, and they have a lot
All
of the
the-
old neon signs.
All the
of
old, it's called
restaurants.
Neon, yeah, like Neon
Right.
City
Yeah,
there.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because the one that I always remember, there was a restaurant called The Flame, was right off the strip,
Oh, yeah.
basically across from the Stardust.
Yeah.
And they've got their old sign there. It always brings back memories.
Yeah, well, they got the old Riviera sign there, the
Right.
Stardust. That's when the mob was there.
That's right.
And those are the casinos they own. But by getting that tells a story to me, and people will remember it hopefully down the line.
Jim, you hit me where my heart is. I was president of the Fire Museum of Greater Chicago. This is the Chicago Fire Department, and we celebrate, in fact, burning down the town every so often, but nobody ever had the guts enough to have a fire museum until several guys got together, and we do now have it, 5218 Southwestern, and my saying to everybody is, don't throw anything out. don't throw it out, we'll take it.
Mhm.
When you're cleaning out the attic or the basement, we've got it. It's quite a undertaking, and that's exactly what we do. Anything that you got, we take and we put it somewhere. John knows. In fact, we had a remote of our program here at the museum one day.
When I was on the Norwood Park Fire District Board, we had a member, I can't remember his name, but he was into the history of the fire departments. He had old trucks at home and models, and I mean, he loved.
We probably know him.
He passed away while he was on the board. Can't remember his name right now.
I know you guys don't know who Ken Little is. Maybe you do. We have lost him here, 6 months ago? Something
That's
like
about
that.
right, yes.
November.
Late last year, yeah.
Yeah, and he was unbelievable with his memory of Chicago, the fire department, and the whole family was on the fire department for one thing.
Yeah, Ken was, he taught a class in the City College in Chicago about
Yeah.
Chicago history, and you would never meet anyone more knowledgeable about Chicago history. You could mention a street name in Chicago, like Halsted or whatever, and he knew who Halsted was, and he could go on for a half hour about one street name. That's how knowledgeable he was.
We dedicated the second floor of the museum, which was an old firehouse that Ed Burke gave me to make into a museum. And that second floor now is the Ken Little Library with all of his things that he's collected all these years, So history is
Well,
something you can't deny.
It paints a picture for you.
Yep.
I mean, we might remember it, but the younger people won't. Now they see that, they go, wow, where'd you get that from?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Bill, you had a heck of a fireman down the street around the corner here. Was a fireman for 18 years, who's currently serving as alderman for the 38th Ward, I believe it is. Nick Spazzato.
Oh, yes.
Nick used to work for me.
A good man.
Yeah.
And the 41st Ward, firefighter and former police officer,
Napolitano.
Napolitano.
Oh, that's right. Anthony Napolitano.
Yeah.
Anthony the Ice Cream Man.
Yeah, right.
The ice cream man.
Yeah, every time I see him, I go, how's the ice cream doing?
You know,
I always laugh.
The police fire community, I used to play with the Emerald Society bagpipes. I play with the pipes and drums of the Chicago Police Department now. I was a founding member of that group. We're all Chicago police officers. We played, as a matter of fact, this T-shirt that I have on now, you can see we played at Brookfield Zoo for the families of survivors from police and fire. And one of the survivors, if I can describe it to the people listening, it says, what does it say?
Two teams,
Oh, yeah,
one family.
Right, 2 teams, 1 family, and it's a logo. It's kind of a takeoff on the Chicago flag, and the logo is one half is a fire department badge, and the other half is Chicago Police Department star. It's kind of interesting. The event was sponsored by the 100 Club, and for those of you that don't know what the 100 Club is, it started a long time ago, and it was basically 100 businessmen that got together and thought, we've got to do something for the families of police officers and firefighters that died in the line of duty. The president now, Joe Ahern, a great guy, he came from background of television news, and they have several events throughout the year for the surviving members of the police and firefighters killed in the line of duty. Brookfield Zoo, they have a picnic for all the family and the kids. And what they do, if a police officer or firefighter dies in the line of duty, and I guess their official name now is the 100 Club of Lake and Cook County. Was the 100 Club of Chicago, but now it's Lake and Cook County. So anyone in Lake and Cook County, firefighter or police officer, that loses their life in the line of duty, first thing they do is they go to the widow or widower and present a check for their expenses to take care of the funeral or whatever else they may need. If they own a home up to a 2-flat, they pay it off immediately. And they also provide secondary education, college, universities for the families of the surviving members' families. And right now, I saw a list. There are a lot of students that are availing themselves of the tuition provided for by the 100 Club. So if you're listening to this and you have any spare change laying around and you're looking for someone to do with it, it's a very extremely worthwhile organization. And again, I know, and Bill and I, we go back and forth about the police and fire situation. Bill unfortunately had a son, a state trooper, who was killed in the line of duty. But again, this is true. It's two teams of one family. We are the family of public safety, and it's something that once you're in it, and I've been retired for about 16 years now, it's something that we're very proud of.
They do a good job,
Right.
very good job.
And I think that is the problem in Chicago. They've lost some of that, what I call pride. I'm not saying that the police and firemen have lost it, but some of the younger officers in it, they have to understand that what this is. This is a team. I first lived in Chicago, and I always said it's one of the best cities to live in. Obviously, was 40 years ago plus. Why? Because they got things done. That's all you cared about as a resident. I still remember the precinct captain knocking on my door Monday before the election. And I opened the door, you know, as usual, I'm very polite. What do you want? I said. He said, well, I want to make sure you and your wife are going to vote tomorrow. I go, you want to make sure I'm going to vote tomorrow? You see that curb that's been sitting there for 8 months? Nobody's come out and fixed it. Plus, I have to have at least 4 or 5 complaints in that the bottom of my big steel garbage can that they used to give you is rotten out. I go, this is the city that works, and you want me to vote for you? Say goodbye. So I close the door. The next day, they fixed that curb, and I had 2 brand new garbage cans.
It's the way to get
No,
things done.
that's right. But see, that's when
Shouldn't
people
be, though.
no, it shouldn't be. But that's when people had pride. I always tell my people, we get a complaint from a resident, you better be out there, because they all have my card and my phone number's on it. I get the call, and Rich knows this and that. I'm going to say, didn't I call you? Well, Jim, I got tied up. You never get tied up. It's always a resident. Go see what's going on. Because to that resident, to me, that's the most important thing to them. Go take care of
I
it,
agree.
find out what's going on.
Yep.
That's why the Village of Norwich still works. And I'm ashamed to say I think the city of Chicago got away from that.
Exactly.
Yeah, the
You
old-
don't see a precinct
Yeah, the old-
anymore.
You don't see nothing.
Yeah,
That's for
No.
sure.
Jim, the old precinct captain system, that, I tell you, that was, that's when they called it the city that worked, it actually did work.
Things
Right.
got
You know,
done.
Let me ask you a question. The precinct captain system, do you have something in place in your village similar to that, or?
We have people who work for our party, our political party, okay? And they knock on doors, and especially during elections, and they will write down notes if there's a problem, and they'll get back to us, and we'll get out there to see what it is. So that's similar to that.
Oh, I saw nothing wrong with that. They used to call it the political machine. I said, well,
Well, we've been called that. You're exactly
yeah,
right.
but I mean, I see absolutely nothing wrong with that.
No, because if I don't know the problem, it don't get fixed.
Right.
But if Andy calls me, says, Jim, we got a real problem. This guy's sort of backing up. This is happening, it's happening. Within an hour, I'm going to have somebody out there. I don't want sort of back up into my basement. Why should I want them? You know, and that's what the people, believe me. I learned so far after 2 elections, these people remember. I had some guy at Baker Square Friday. I walked in. He goes, "Hey, Mr. Chamorro, how are you?" I have no idea who the guy is. So I waved back because that's my part of being a politician. I'll wave to anybody. Anyway, he comes up to me, he says, "You're doing a great job." He says, and he was with somebody, and he said, "This guy here has been the best mayor for the village of Norwich." So my point is, people remember. They remember. And they're really going to remember if you don't help them.
Right, exactly. The common touch. I remember a story talking along those lines when Adlai Stevenson ran twice for president, and naturally he didn't win. There was some event at the Conrad Hilton in Chicago, and Harry Truman was in Adlai's suite, and Adlai Stevenson said, "Harry, I can't understand it. My message isn't getting across." And Harry Truman was standing by the window, and he was looking out, and he saw someone on Michigan Avenue waiting for the bus. And he said, "Adlai, to get elected, you have to get in touch with that guy waiting for that bus, and you, unfortunately, just can't do it." And so, obviously, you're doing it here because you're popular with people you don't even know.
That's true.
Well, let's put it this way. I have a lot of good people who work for me who are either on the village payroll or in my party, and they put out the message, and they're very good people because they all believe the same way I do. This is our village. We like the way it's running. We don't want nothing to happen to it. True, Andy?
That is correct.
Well, that's obviously a philosophy that's working. Your party, you have nonpartisan elections, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So, but what's the name of your party?
Norwich Improvement Party.
Okay.
It's still back from the days when Joe Sieb ran it.
Right.
Just a little footnote to local history. Beside Norwich, there's an adjoining suburb that's also surrounded by the city of Chicago, known as Harwood Heights. And I think we know that Harwood Heights...
Harwood who?
Yeah, okay, that's one thing I want to bring up. That Harwood Heights is much newer, basically taking up the previously unincorporated areas. How are your relations with Harwood Heights? Might you see a day when those two suburbs might merge, get together? Maybe not. Each has very different roots.
They're two different communities.
Quite different. Okay. You can sense that as you drive around.
Yeah. I don't think that they need us, and I don't think we need them. Now, you may say, let's combine so that we have one police force. We can save money. Then the question's going to be, you call in, and because you're a Norwich resident, the guy from Howard Heights goes to another call. You know, to me right now things are running very well.
That's the main
I know Arlene, who's the mayor there. She's working very hard. She does a great job over there with her trustees. And it's difficult for municipalities right now, so I don't like to look in anybody's backyard and say, hey, you could do a better job here. Because you know what? We all could do a better job.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, time for another break.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Been a very lively discussion so far. We're going to continue after this break. So
We'll be right back after
stay
these
tuned.
messages of interest and importance.
I'll stay one more.
Hello, friends. Are you looking for a place to have some printing done? Well, I have the right place for you to go, and that is the printing store in Oak Park, Illinois. Call or see Phil Berry at 621 Madison Street or call 708-383-3638. Phil Berry will sit down with you and help you plan whatever you need printed. Now his products are brochures, booklets, business cards, catalogs, envelopes, letterheads, flyers, invitations, newsletters, notepads, menus, mailers, manuals, labels, posters, postcards, price list, NCR forms, sale sheets, table tents, pocket folders, and presentation forms. And he also has 1 to 4 color offset printing, digital copying, high-speed copying, graphic designs, typesetting, laminating, foil stamping, die cutting, and imprinting. And his complete bindery service includes booklets, cutting, scoring, folding, numbering, padding, and drilling. So once again, for all your printing needs, call or see Phil Berry at the printing store at 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois, or call 708-383-3638. They are located at Madison Street and Clarence, just east of Oak Park Avenue. And that's at 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois, or give Phil Berry a call at 708-383-3638. For all your printing needs, the printing store is there to help you. They're 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois. And once again, you can call Phil Berry at 708-383-3638.
Tom?
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for staying tuned. We're back with our same panel. You know, we talked about it or touched on it earlier. One of the main reasons, I think, for the increasing economic development in the village of Norwich is the low crime rate. Jim, being bordering on a city that has an extremely high crime rate, how do you do it?
Well, the village of Norwich, we're very lucky because we have a lot of young officers who are very aggressive, and they don't mind getting in and out of their cars and checking out what's going on. And like I said before, we have people who lived here 30, 40, 50 years, maybe 60. And when they see something that's not in line, they pick up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So now...
Community involvement.
Right.
Key. You know, as a retired Chicago police officer, and Dennis can say that is a key. Community involvement.
Well, what happens is when you have 34, 35 officers and you got 3 shifts to cover, you can pretty much figure out you don't have that many police officers.
What's your manpower again here?
About 34, 35 right now.
Uh-huh.
And we have 3 shifts. So there's probably, with the sergeants and everything, probably about 12 on a shift. But the point is, we have auxiliaries that we use, and that's a big thing. The auxiliaries, to me, they don't have the police authorities in that. Don't get me wrong.
Are they volunteers?
No, they're paid. They're paid. But what's good about them is you put them in a police car, you drive them around Harlem, Irving, and someone doesn't know they're a police officer or not, and that deters any troubles or problems that you might have. So,
Good friend of mine is one of your auxiliary guys.
Oh, yeah?
Used to be a lieutenant of fire department in Chicago.
Bob Smigulski. Shmoo.
Yeah. Good guy. Great guy.
You know who Bob is?
He loves it.
Bob's my cousin.
He's really. No kidding.
Yeah. Bob's been a crazy man with the fire radio since he was.
Yep.
Since he came back probably
From
Vietnam.
Yeah.
He would hear a call, he'd jump in the car, and he's gone. And you gotta hope that his wife came with him. So.
I might add to that also, Norwich isn't too big for its own good. And what I mean to say is, when people call for service, whether it be 911 or whatever, that call is not going to ring 30, 40, or 50 times. And I say that from experience. Additionally, the people are accustomed to, and they will not tolerate, not getting service. And if there's what would you say? If there is a group hanging around a park late at night, and should they be drinking or whatever, it's not going to be tolerated. The community won't tolerate it, and the police aren't going to give it a blind eye. So, that's why you go through Norwich, you're not going to see graffiti, which is an offshoot of gangs and things like that. Right. You're not going to see unattended, lights out, or as referenced before, the curbs broken or potholes. They're all mended. The service is there for the community, in so many different ways.
The rule I have on the graffiti, and we've had a few instances of it, is that in 24 hours it's taken down.
Good. Very good.
Because if you don't do that, that brings more in.
Right.
So what happens is my public works people, or if it's a business, we try to get them to do it. Otherwise, I'll send public works out there, and they'll spray it off, and we'll be moving on. That's just how it is. Now, a good example, what you just said was calling 911. We now have a 911 consolidation. Okay? This was another dream thing that came out of Springfield. And what they did was, if you didn't have 25,000 population, you had to combine with somebody else. So what happened is Howard Heights, ourself, and Schiller Park are all combined. The radio dispatch is in Howard Heights. And you don't think I'm not worried that sometimes a call will come in, because when we had our own dispatchers, we had everything on recording, we had all of it. If something didn't go down right, we'd get to the bottom of it real quick. So far, it's been pretty good. They have a supervisor over there that keeps on top of it. But everybody is on call to consolidate. And the next one out there is Rosemont, and even the mayor, Brad Stevens, is having troubles trying to get around that rule. And we know he has no residents, just money, so. Well, he doesn't. He has like 2,800 residents,
Right.
and he's got stacks of money all over the place.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to agree with you about the police department. The Norwich has got one of the best police departments in the United States of America. I know quite a few of the boys. I know Officer Smith, who was a 5012, and I know Officer Ted, that's over at Ridgewood, 5037.
Teddy Vasopoulos.
I know 5039, I can't think of his name, Steve, and I know quite a few of the guys, and I tell you, when I go down the street, I see a squad car go past me, I stick my hand out and wave. A lot of them sometimes will stop because they all know me, because I was involved with Ridgewood High School, and I know a lot of the boys, a lot of the police officers through Ridgewood, because they're in security over there. And I will say, I cannot speak more highly about a police department than Norwich. And also, Mr. Mayor, I want to tell you, one day I was coming home from shopping, and I was going down Ottawa, 4100 block Ottawa, where I live. There happened to be a big hole in the middle of the street, about 4137, I think it was, somewhere around there. I called the village, I called your office, and I told them about it. Before I could even take the packages out of my truck and take them in the house, there was a Norwich truck right there looking at it right then and there. I cannot be more happy. And in fact, there goes a truck right now, right past our nose here. I cannot be more happy living in the village of Norwich like I am. I will say. I did, when I got married back in 1968, I lived in Harwood Heights, 7437 West Argyle. I lived there. In fact, if you go past that house, 7437 Argyle, alongside the garage, you'll see a big radio tower. And the reason for the radio tower was I was a dispatcher for the Salvation Army canteen service back those a few years ago. And I had a dispatch center set up in my garage. And the big antenna, the big tower that had a repeater on it that went downtown to 509 Union is still there yet. But I was happy in Harwood Heights, but I am more happy in Norwich. Everybody, even the girls at the Village Hall. Now, I was very good friends with Vivian. I guess she retired now. Vicky, because she had friends that lived just around near my place up in Wisconsin. But I will say, and I want, even though this is being taped, and I know it's going to be on their website and it's going to be on the radio, I love the Village of Norwich. And there isn't a darn thing I wouldn't do for the village. And also, when you have all your, like Touch a Truck and all your different events, I make the promos to put on WRHS. I just did one last week for the church over there on Acacia Park, because they had a doings over there. They're trying to raise money. So I love Norwich, and I want that to be.
Well, that's great.
Well, you know what? I've been blessed because over the years, many of the police officers have retired. Okay? Now you say, what? Well, police officers, they got a lot of experience in that, but sometimes they start to get what I call a little bit of a attitude or something, and when you hire new guys, you don't want that to go to them.
Right.
So when they kind of all left, because I only have about maybe 3 or 4 police officers who are close to retirement out of the 34. The young guys feed off the young guys, and that's what I want. And they understand that we talk about service, because I go over there once or twice a year and I sit there during their roll calls, and what happens is they ask me a bunch of questions. But it's the fact that they're young, they're learning, you know, they're full of piss and vinegar, as we would say, and you know what? They're good for the village. And many of them grew up here or still live here, which is even better. People told me that was not a good idea. That's wrong, because they know all the people. They know the kids. They know what's going on. And you know what? And they care about their community.
Right. Well, police community involvement, that's key.
Yeah.
Well, I there's a comedian, I don't know if any here are old enough to remember. His name was Mort Saul.
Sure.
Mort Saul, they asked him, you know, when you're driving around the country, you do a lot of engagements. Do you ever have any problems getting stopped by the police? And he said, no, I really don't. Because when I get stopped by the police, I get out of the car, I take a $10 bill, and I drop it on the ground, and I say, oh, excuse me, officer, I think you dropped that 10. So he picks it up. Never had a problem. It worked until I got to the city of Chicago. I got stopped on Lakeshore Drive, did the same thing, got out of the car, dropped the $10 bill. He said, excuse me, officer, I think you dropped that 10. The Chicago guy says, no, I dropped a 20. That's place.
Very true. Very true.
Right, and you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And as far as the local police and the village administrators, I think they, in a sense, learned the lesson of what happened at the Brickyard. The crime figures may not have gone up that dramatically, but the perception was increased crime, and then that hastened the demise of the enclosed Brickyard Mall. They might be seeing their last days too, in a sense. But the HIP, I think, will prosper because of the lessons they could have learned and did learn from what happened at the Brickyard.
Well, let me tell you a story. There's the big workout place that we have here in the village.
Export.
It's huge. I started getting phone calls. People are breaking in my locker. They're stealing this. They're stealing this. Well, I go, what the hell is going on here? This is the village of Norwich. So I grab one of my guys. I go, come on, we're going over to the workout center. And the guy goes, I don't think I need to work out. I says, come on, with me. So we go over there, and I get a hold of the manager. I said, I want to talk to you. He says, what? I He says, I'm getting complaints, people getting robbed and this thing. He goes, well, you know, and I go, what do you mean, well? I'm going to tell you something right now. Any more, I'm going to close this whole place down. Because we don't need that in the village of Norwich. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Go get some Chicago cops, put them out there by the door, get some cameras. I know you can't be right in the locker room watching. You better put some money into the system, because I'm not going to be known as having an export where you go there and the next thing you know, your wallet's gone. That's why they have lockers. I have not heard nothing since then. Because you know what? I was going to yank a license. And then the franchise owner called me. And I told them the same thing. We're not going to stand for it. We don't stand. They go, well, we're like, who are you? I says, I'm the mayor. We don't stand for it. Okay, it's real simple. In fact, I had a gentleman come in here the other day. He wanted to do some redevelopment. And he brought in 4 or 5 of his people from a real estate office. And he's up here, and he's a big guy, and he wanted to talk to me for weeks. And you know what? I know when I don't want to talk to someone, so I avoid him. But finally, he catches up to me. So he comes in, and he sits down. He goes, you know, trying to get an appointment with you and talk to you is like trying to talk to the Godfather. I said, well, I'm not the Godfather. What's your problem? He goes, well, you know, I got 40, 50 people who work in my real estate office, and they don't like working in Norwich. I go, really? And why is that? He goes, well, because, you know, you got zoning, you got this, you got... I said, really? I says, well, there's reasons why we have all those things. He says, well, you don't understand. He says, you don't know the business that you're missing. And that's when I said, I don't give a blank what business I'm missing. You can now leave. I haven't seen him since. Because you know what? The rules are for everybody. Andy's on the zoning board. He understands. We try to be consistent. Sometimes the vote is 5-2 or whatever. But you know what? The whole point is we have to be consistent. And it's our town. You don't protect your own town, what are you doing? When I go home and go to sleep at night, believe me, I sleep real good. Real good. My wife don't even understand how I sleep so well. Because you know what? I know that I did what I was supposed to do for the village. And I didn't give anything away. What I'm doing is I'm setting the future for the village so that the next person can take the baton and go with it. Because I got to go take care of Manuel's spot.
But population-wise, stable, leaving?
15,000.
And that's pretty much been...
Yeah, it's been about 14,900. It's a little over 15,000. It's hard to get more people to come here because you are landlocked.
Right.
You don't have like condominiums and everything or developments going up. So we're pretty well landlocked.
And Harwood Heights is significantly smaller, isn't it? Maybe 9 or 10.
They're about half, yes.
About half.
Yeah, we always remind them of that too.
Good.
Not that I think it's a difference, I just remind them of that.
Well, before we get to our next break, let's just talk a little bit more because Jim has to inform me he's going to have to leave after this segment. So let's touch just a little bit more about the history of Norwich. Was it always surrounded by the city of Chicago, or was the city of Chicago incorporated its way out to Norwich?
Was always surrounded by the city of Chicago. In fact, I believe it was in the late 50s, early 60s, the Harlem Irving Plaza wanted to move here. Joe Sieb went to somebody's house, invited everybody over there. They were in a basement, and he was telling them how much we needed this complex, and these people were against them. They didn't want any more, nobody wants change. That's how it is. But he convinced them how good this was. And that's the thing about Joe Sieb. He was a very, very smart man, way ahead of his time. Now that's a picture, I believe, on the wall what you have here of his wife. I believe they tell me she was the brains. She would tell him, Joe, you should do this. Joe, you should do that. So because of that, and you're getting the Harlem Irving Mall and everything else, and if I had Michael Marchese here, he would tell you of all the shopping centers he has, this is what he still looks at as being the jewel of all of his shopping centers. Because his dad and him started it way back when, and it's still very, very successful.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, people, and you just talked about them. People like that are visionaries.
Yes.
You know, the something that doesn't look good, you know, presently. And there's a lot of people like this, mostly very successful people. They see somehow, it's like they can see into the future, and they know that this is going to be good. Maybe not good today, but in the future. I mean, you know, you talked about it just for the tax base alone. A shopping center like the Hip is, I mean, I don't know the figures, but it's got to be a good chunk of change.
Right.
Are you saying that the Hip was not in Norwich?
No, it was always, that land was always in Norwich. It just didn't exist. They never built it out.
Okay.
And then when they probably had to get zoning and everything, so Joe convinced the residents, this is good for us. I'll give you a real quick example, something that just happened 3 or 4 years ago. I saw that if we didn't put video poker in the village, that we were going to get hurt. And people say, well, what do you mean? So anyway, I knew that around us we were surrounded with Schiller Park, Elmwood Park, not Chicago, and the rest of them. They all had video poker. In my restaurants and bars, people were going there. So either I do something to help my people, otherwise I'm going to have a lot of places that are empty. And you know how an empty village looks, or a city looks terrible. Well, anyway, I push it forward, and I have 6 trustees. They have to vote and approve. And my trustees were probably 75 years old, 80 years old, and 85 years old. And they were not crazy about the idea. In fact, a couple of them came in and said that, Jim, the seniors are going to kill you. They're going to absolutely kill you by putting this in. They're not going to like it. And I said, I'm going to do one better. You're going to find the senior, your neighbor, playing at those slots, and that's when you can go visit them. The other day, one of them comes in and says, you were right. I was at Blossom's having breakfast, and Dorothy was over there knocking down the slot machine. And I said, for $10 to $20, they're having their fun. It's like going to bingo. They don't want to go to the casino. God bless them. Maybe they'll win 500. But anyway, it's been a real success. We don't get a lot of money because the state, again, cut us out. But the fact is, we get some money, and we kept our customers, our residents, here.
Well, that's like I say. That's you know, it's you have to have a vision for the future. Sometimes on the surface things don't seem good, but in the long run they really turn out.
Well, I've always been Tom, a risk taker. Always been a risk taker my whole life. That doesn't mean it's always worked out. I mean, Andy will tell you, he sees me at meetings, the village meeting, and sometimes a resident will get up there and start saying stuff. And they don't understand that it's 7 o'clock and I got my hot turkey sandwich sitting at home, and they're starting to bug me. So I tell them, I don't want to hear it no more. And Andy starts laughing. I can see it back there. But you know what? I give them their 5-10 minutes and let them speak. And, you know, but some of them, they don't want to stop talking.
Well, Jim, before you have to leave us, on behalf of the panel and the station, I'd really like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
Well, this was a pleasure. Thank you. This was a pleasure.
It's been very entertaining. Hopefully you will join us again. Andy and Rich, you're welcome to stick around for the next segment. We're going to be talking about some football. The Chicago Bears will be in the Super Bowl next year. and Jim, I'm going to give you a final word, but before, when Ram loses the election, I'm going to tell him, don't set your sights on Norwich. I think that guy's got a lock on that.
You think he's got a lock on there?
You might want to move out here.
Yeah. Okay.
I can tell you a quick story about the Bears too.
Go for it.
My prior career before this was I was an IRS agent, and we spent 7-8 years out at the Bears. Well, anyway, I forget what it was. It was the Bears in the playoffs against Carolina, and that one receiver for Carolina must have caught 8 or 9 passes. Had to. I mean, he was catching them, and I happened to show up the Monday after the game, so they lost the game because this guy caught all these passes. So I had to go see Ted Phillips at the time because he was the head accountant, and I walked in his office and I said, "Ted, you okay?" And I could see he just got beat up. I could see it. "So what's wrong, Ted?" He goes, "Virginia McCaskey was just in here." I said, "Really?" I said, "And what's the problem?" He goes, "Do you know she's 80 years old?" I said, "No." He goes, "She's 80 years old, and she told me, how the hell could we not cover that receiver?" So that goes back to that's how they work.
All right, well, Jim, once again, thanks for coming. And before our break, we're going to give you the final words. Something to say about your village?
Well, the village of Norwich is a great place to live. It's a great place to raise your family. It's got affordable housing. It's got good police and fire protection. So, if you're looking to be somewhat close to the city but not be involved in all the city nonsense, the village of Norwich is a tremendous alternative, and I would recommend it to anybody.
Thanks, Jim.
Very good.
Thank you, Jim.
What a pleasure, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
Rich?
You guys don't talk too much when I'm gone now.
We're waiting for you to go.
Talk behind my back. I'm used to it.
Now for another brief intermission. You've been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians.
Your Bears talk now.
Thank you.
Say hello to,
I will do that.
to those guys.
Well, friends, it's that time of the year again when you want to check your roof, siding, and gutters and make sure they're in great shape in case we have any bad weather. You may want to check the roof, siding, and gutters on your home and make sure that they are in good shape. You don't want mold or mildew in your attic or crawl space, or drip, drip, drip on the ceilings in your rooms, or have your walls damaged by leaky gutter or bad siding. So don't have double expense. Sooner or later you're going to have to get it repaired. So why not call Besh Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters at area code 630-616-1359. Mike Besh will drive over in his shiny red truck with ladders on top, and Mike will look over your roof, siding, and gutters and give you an estimate and go from there. So once again, don't have double expense. Call Besh Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters for a free estimate at area code 630-616-1359. That's Besh Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters at area code 630-616-1359. Call today for a free estimate. That's Besh Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters, 630-616-1359 for a free estimate. 630-616-1359. Besh Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters.
back to our discussion. Tom?
Okay, we're back. Thanks for staying tuned. We're back. A few of our panel has left. Jim, Andy, and Rich had to get back to other commitments here in the village. We're going to switch gears for the segment. Originally, we were supposed to be talking about football. Interesting subject here in the city of Chicago. Let's start off with, of course, the premier football team here in the city of Chicago. The Chicago
Cardinals?
The Chicago Bears, right. Well, interesting enough, since we're on the subject, and you just answered the question, the trivia question of what are the only two original NFL teams left in existence. And we just mentioned the two, the Cardinals and the Bears. Mm-hmm. If you saw a list of the original NFL teams, you wouldn't recognize half of them. The Canton Bulldogs was one. But anyway, the Chicago Bears, 1920, Decatur, Illinois, named after the owner of a starch factory, Staley, who said that he'd sponsored the team if you named the team after him. And then they were there for a few years, and then they moved to Chicago. They moved into the Wrigley Field, and people always question about how did the Bears get the name, the Chicago Bears, because, well, the reason they got the colors, orange and blue, was because George Halas, the founder of the Chicago Bears, and the founder of the NFL, played his college football at the University of Illinois. So he kept it simple. He carried his college colors over to the professional team that he founded. But when they moved into Wrigley Field, the Cubs were already playing there. Cubs are little bears, so it just fell in line that they were named the Chicago Bears. And they played there up until 1970. And in 1970, the NFL enacted a clause that if you wanted to maintain an NFL contract, you had to play in a stadium that seated at least, I believe it was 50,000. Wrigley Field didn't fit the bill, so they moved around. Actually, I think they played a game in Minnesota. They were talking about, then it was called Dyke Stadium at Northwestern. Mm-hmm. After the stated residents of Evanston got a load of the conduct of the Bear fans after a game, the Evanston decided that I don't think we want this team. So, teams always talk about their fans and how rowdy they are and how tough they are. And I know there are a lot of teams that have fans that have been thrown out of bars and thrown out of a lot of different establishments, but I think the Bears are the only team that they had their whole team thrown out of a city. They didn't want anything to do with the Chicago
Tom, do you know
Bears.
if they were thrown out after just one game or one
season? Yeah, I think, it was one game I think they played.
One game, that's interesting.
And then that's when they moved to Soldier Field. I think the first season there was in 71, and they've been there ever since. Bill, Bear fan?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
My dad used to take me to Wrigley Field, and we saw a lot of games there, and Soldier Field, and you had to be a Bears fan. My place in Wisconsin, up in Baraboo, I used to eat in this one establishment, and the guy said, "Bill, are you going to be here for the game Sunday?" And the Bears were playing the Packers, and I said, "Are you crazy? You think I'm nuts to be here?" And he says, "Oh, no." He says, "There's a lot of Bears fans that come here," and I didn't believe him, but I did go in there, and yes, there were a lot of Chicago people, in there. But if that hadn't have been it, I wouldn't have been there. I don't commit suicide that much with those Packer fans, and most of my relations are either Minnesota or Wisconsin. So you know what I go through when at the end of season.
Well, the Bears Packers, that's the oldest rivalry in professional football.
Yes.
They asked Curly Lambeau, which Lambeau Field is named after Curly Lambeau, and his two brothers, Mo and Champ Lambeau. But anyway, they never shook hands after a game. And they asked Lambeau, they said, how come you never shake hands with Ellis after a game? And he said, because when I win, he wants to punch me in the face. And when he wins, I want to punch him in the face. So shaking hands is out of the question. They never shook hands. They were bitter enemies.
Oh.
Now, Vince Lombardi, he was a good friend of George Ellis.
George Ellis, yeah.
But Lambeau and yeah, I guess in their early days there were a lot of tension between the. Rich, what about you? Bear fan?
Yeah, I'm a Bear fan. My grandfather was actually a season ticket holder, and so once in a while I get to go to a game at Wrigley Field. One of the things we talk about when we talk Bears or football over coffee is I think I was 10 years old, went to see the Bears play the Lions. That would have been 1961. And, they talk about the length of the game. And I sit there and I say, well, what are they talking about? Because they, meaning the owners and the networks, are the ones who've lengthened the game. When we walked into Wrigley Field, the game started at 1. By 3 o'clock, we were in the bar across the street. I was drinking a Coke and watching the AFL game that was on. And it was 2 hours. That was it. I remember my grandfather and his cronies being really ticked off one time. When TV first came in, I don't know if they did a TV timeout once a quarter or once a half. It was something like that. And they had spotted the guy down on the sidelines who gave the signal. He's the little man who crossed his hands.
Oh, yeah, the mitten guy holds the mitten,
and
orange mitten over his chest.
They had failed to have the TV timeout. It was a game between the Bears and the Colts, close game. And Roger LeClaire, who was not really a very good field goal kicker to begin with, was the Bears kicker. He came out and he was ready to kick the game-winning field goal, and it was a close one. And they had the TV timeout right before the play. So they came back from the TV timeout. Of course, LeClaire missed the field goal, and they were up in arms. You know what? The TV guys froze our kicker out, and he missed the field goal. My guess is Roger probably would have missed it anyway. But yeah, I'm a Bears fan. So,
Rich, how about you?
Also a Bears fan. I'm never that very knowledgeable of football, let's say, compared to baseball, but I've always rooted for the Bears. We'll never forget the '85 Bears,
right?
And the way they were portrayed on Saturday Night Live for many
the
years.
The Super Bowl shuffle.
Right. But I'm wondering, most of all, how a small city like Green Bay could support a major football franchise.
Well,
that seems unique in the annals.
At the time, in the 20s, in the 30s, and up until the 40s, pro football was not popular. College football was
the big
college
show,
football
right?
was huge, but pro football wasn't. And thanks to George Ellis, who again we talked about this earlier about being a visionary, George Ellis stuck it out. I tell people, I said, when you watch the Super Bowl, you can thank George Ellis, because if it wasn't for him, the NFL, I'm sure eventually someone would have started pro football in some level. But he stuck it out, and he popularized it. And in the 1940s, the Bears, I mean, before there was a term called America's team, the Chicago Bears were America's team. They won, I think, 4 national championships and played in the 5th in the 40s. I always tell people, if I had to pick out one piece of Bears trivia to talk about, it would be the 1940 national championship, where the Chicago Bears defeated the Washington Redskins. This is for the national championship now, by a score of 73-0.
That's right.
Now, people listening, they're probably saying, not familiar with that game, they're saying, well, Tom, that's pretty easy to figure out. The Bears had a real good game, a real good team, and Washington had a bad team. On the contrary, they played earlier in the year, Washington won. The game was at Washington, and Washington was favored going into the game. So how did the Chicago Bears win 73-0? For those of you that know the words of the Chicago Bears fight song, you know there's a line in the fight song that says, "We'll never forget the way you thrilled the nation with your T formation." That was the year that George Ellis introduced the T formation. For people that are knowledgeable about present-day football, it would be the equivalent of seeing a wishbone offense. for the first time and not knowing how to play defense against it. 8 different Bears scored touchdowns in that game. In the fourth quarter, the head official went over to George Hallis and told him, "Coach, if you score again, please go for 2 points. We're on our last football. You kicked all the rest of them into the stands." That's a true story.
Did you know the famous line from that game was at some point in the game, Sammy Baugh was the quarterback for the Redskins, and he hit a receiver in the end zone, and the pass was dropped. And the score hadn't gotten totally away at that point, so they asked him after the game, they said, do you think if he would have caught that pass, it would have made any difference? And Sammy Baugh's reply was, yeah. He says, I think the score would have been 73-7.
Yeah, that's a hell of a game. Well, the Bears being one of the 2 original teams, there's so much history, with the Chicago Bears. And well, let's fast forward to this season. New coach, a lot of new players picked up. Las Vegas, and I know that gambling's illegal here in the state of Illinois, so I shouldn't be talking about this because I know no one here has ever bet on a pro game. Anyway, Vegas has the over/under total wins at 6.5. I think they're better than that. The line was 4.5 last year, and they won 5 games.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're two games better.
They seem to be all new guys.
So I'm going to say.
New team.
So, predictions. I'm going to say 8-8. Bill.
I agree. I will agree with that. Yeah, that's just about where they are. They didn't really show me anything in that game the other day, the Hall of Fame game. That was an added. Normally you play 4 preseason. There was like an add-on. Basically, that was a scrimmage. You couldn't.
Yeah, that's true. They weren't showing much.
Rich, what do you think?
I'm going to be optimistic and say go along with you guys and say 8-8, strictly because I would love to see the Bears win some games for a change. It's been a while.
I think about a 500 team. I wonder how many more years it might be before there'll be a championship caliber team.
Well, I think it's probably going to be. They're going to be operating under a new system, offensive and defensive system. 9 wins, they'd probably be in the hunt for a wild card. The problem is, for the last few years, the NFC North, there really hasn't been a weak team. Detroit was pathetic for a number of years. They're right back there. Minnesota's good. Green Bay has had our number, unfortunately, for the last few years. So that's a problem right there, because you play home and away. There's 8 games with tough teams right off the bat, so half of your schedule,
Mm-hmm.
It makes it very difficult. I would say, being totally optimistic, I would say 9 wins in the hunt for a wild card. I personally don't think, and again, Rodgers is back. I think the key to Green Bay is Rodgers, how he bounces back off the injury. He's getting up there. I mean, I don't know how old he is. I'd be guessing, but if he's back to his old self, we're in some serious trouble, because there's 2 losses right there. But if not, if he gets injured again, I think we could conceivably be back in the hunt.
I was going to say, every year the Sun-Times, prior to the season, does they do 10 questions, and you're supposed to rate the questions. Either give a plus 10, which means you're an optimist. A 0 means you're undecided. Minus 10 means you're totally negative about it. And I was in a realistic mood the day that I took the test, and I scored a 10 total, which means, according to their rating system, I'm looking at it sort of realistically. But when I really started to look at it, though, Tom, I thought, Nagy, is a first-year coach. Trubisky, I think they did the right thing. How could I put it? Paced, roll the dice. You need a franchise quarterback. If that's the guy he picked, that's the thing. But I started to look at all the different parts of the team and say, you know what, there is a lot of iffy stuff going on here. So 8-8, I think, is I would love to see it, but it's optimistic, I think.
Yeah, plus Nagy, being a new coach, he's really going to be, he is heavily involved in the team. John Fox, who I really liked, and he was extremely well respected around the league. His time came and went. He just didn't. How enthusiastic can you say all the years in the different teams? I'm not saying
True.
He wasn't doing his job, but I just didn't see the enthusiasm.
No. You know what? I would have to give him a lot of props, though, because we talk about it on the show that we do. And, obviously leading up to Fox being fired, we talked about this a little bit. And I said, I said to my partner, Jim, think about this. You had 19 guys that ended up on injured reserve. You had a team that I was optimistic about the team last year. But when you are sort of on the cusp of maybe, you could either be good or you could be bad, and then you get 19 guys injured. So you're a pretty iffy team. I said, my guess is, the papers will, or the media will never give him credit for this, but Fox probably had to pull every trick, if you want to put it that way, out of his bag just to keep the team competitive. 19 guys. I don't care. You could say the New England Patriots. You lose 19 guys to injury, you're in bad shape.
Well, and plus, if you look at it, I know statistics are for losers, and being around Cub fans all my life, I know how they love to talk about at the end of the season when they were in last place. If we had won those 3 games, and we would have. That all that stuff is nonsense. But having said that, last season, the Bears, there were 3 games there that the Bears should have won.
Sure.
So they could have easily been 8-8 last year. I don't know if that would have saved Fox's job, but it would have been a little less disheartening to Bear fans. I tell you, Bear fans, every city talks about they've got great fans, but Bear fans, I would rank right up there at the top. Their support is unwavering.
No doubt about it. I would say they through thick and thin. When I remember seeing a game, it was the night that they retired Butkus and Sayers' jersey. It was Halloween night, and the game was played in terrible conditions, driving rainstorm, and the Bears played the Packers. The Packers kicked their butts, and at the end of the game, they had the news people out there. There were some people left in the stands, and they interviewed a guy who's out there soaking wet, saw the Bears lose by God knows how much, and they said, well, why did you stay? And he says, I'm a fan. He says, I'm a Bears fan. He goes, I don't care what the score is or whatever the outcome is. He says, I'm a Bears fan. I'm here soaked, losing, whatever. And that's a Bears fan.
I don't know if you saw it, but we can't overlook. We have our 2 days ago we had our 28th inductee into the NFL Hall of Fame, Brian Urlacher. I know the Bears have the most inductees into the NFL Hall of Fame of any team in the NFL. They also have the most retired jerseys. I know when people say, what team has the second most inductees, I say, who cares?
Did you see when they introduced some of the Bears, the older Bears, did you see that picture of Butkus?
No, which one?
Dick.
No, I mean, what picture?
It was on the television, when they were at the Hall of Fame. And it just made me sick to see him. He just didn't even look like him. Didn't even look like him.
I haven't seen him in a while.
I didn't see it.
We had a gentleman who his family donated a lot of the property that makes up the Norwich Park District, And when the Norwich Park first started, Stu Tookie and Bill Tookie was the superintendent of Norwich Park District. Well, Bill Tookie played baseball and football at U of I, and he was an offensive end. He was a upperclassman when Butkus was a freshman, and he said one day they were doing a drill, and it was receivers and backs against defensive backs and linebackers, a cover drill. And he said he went out for a pass, and he beat the guy who was covering him. And the coach got all over this guy. He said, don't ever let him do that again. So Tookie went to the back of the line, and he saw this guy was eyeing him up, and he was, making sure that he was going to cover Tookie again. So Tookie went out for the next time it was his turn. He went out for a pass. He turned to look at the pass, and he says, "That's the last thing I saw. The guy leveled me." And he says, the guy stood over me, and he said, "Don't ever catch a pass on me again." And he goes, that guy was Dick Butkus. And that was Dick Butkus's M.O. That was the guy that he was. So.
Yeah, well, Brian gave a real nice speech. I don't know if you heard it. He talked about family. We were talking about family earlier, about the police and fire family, and he was talking about the players in the NFL players, and they, the coaches and players, and you play together and stay together. You really do become a family.
He did.
Was he playing about 10 years ago? I didn't quite get the time frame of.
He left. It was like about, was it seven years ago? He's got. Yeah, he's been gone
Fairly
5.
recent, then.
He's been gone 5 years, because I think.
Oh, okay.
I think in order to get on the ballot for the Hall of Fame, I think you have to be 5 years. So it's been at least 5 years, and then he was elected on the first ballot, which is rare.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any kind of consensus out there as to who was the greatest Bears player ever?
Well, I'll give you my answer.
There's a few names
I'll give you my answer of all time, and it's hard to argue with this, is Sid Luckman. Sid Luckman quarterbacked the Bears to 4 national championships and played in a 5th. That's a pretty hard statistic to argue with. Modern day, Walter, of course, you got to say, I think if Gale hadn't gotten hurt, I think he probably would have surpassed Walter.
Tom, did you see Sid Luckman play? I'm curious.
No.
Yeah, no? I mean, I don't know why, because he was, the late 40s is when he was finally done?
I don't remember. I mean, I was a kid
when
my dad...
That was prior. And that was, again, pro football was just starting to get popular. As a matter of fact, I think the first nationally radio broadcast was that 1940 national championship with the Bears and Redskins.
As late as 1940. That's surprising.
Yeah, and that they say that was what really put the Chicago Bears on the map. Like
Sid Luckman identified with a T formation. I associated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Prior to that, they used to snap the ball. And now I guess they call it the Wildcat or whatever it is. And if you're playing defense, you knew where the ball was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you saw the quarterback got the ball, and he asked. But when the quarterback went under center, it baffled everybody. And then when they kind of concealed the handoffs, it was a completely revolutionary way to play.
Definitely.
Yeah.
They brought in George Hallis brought in a guy from the West Coast, and I think they were running the offense at Stanford. It was Clark Shaughnessy that came in and taught the team the offense, and he's also part of Bears lore, obviously. So,
well, George Hallis he had records that stood into I think it was the record that he had that stood in the 70s. Longest run for a longest fumble recovery run for a touchdown. It was like 98 yards. And you know who fumbled the ball that he recovered? Jim Thorpe.
Oh,
the famous Jim Thorpe.
Yes.
Yeah. And that record stood for 30, 40 years.
Did Irv Kupsnet ever play for the Bears? You always seem to be associated with them to some
Yeah.
degree. I don't know.
I don't know if he did or he didn't.
I think
Certainly didn't go
Irv
very
Cupson
far.
had played college football, I believe, but he
Maybe
only.
that's what I'm thinking. Okay.
And
Okay.
I know he was the color commentator on radio for the
Yeah.
Bears for many years.
That's right,
but-
Jack.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember when we had the Chicago Cardinals?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just barely.
What's a little history of the Cardinals? Are they in the same league, or do they? What,
Well, one
do we
thing,
know?
one thing, Callis despised him. So that was one of the reasons why they left. He
How
kind of
long have
forced
they been
it out.
gone?
It's 1959, I think.
Probably,
Yeah, because the St. Rita High School,
'Cause they were playing in
their
Wrigley too.
band, their
weren't they?
band was the official band of the Chicago Cardinals.
The one as a kid, collecting playing cards. I remember getting an Ollie Matson card, and my dad telling me, because I believe Ollie Matson was traded for 9 players. The Cardinals traded him to, I believe it was the Rams, and got 9 players, 7 or 9 players in exchange. But the Cardinals were, they were the poor stepchild of
Yeah, I remember I was in a bar.
Chicago.
I was in a bar in Bridgeport once, and we were talking about the Bears were playing the Arizona Cardinals, and I said, I said, now they can drag out all those old die-hard Cardinal fans, and the bartender says, I'm one of them.
There's a dumb question. Did the Bears ever play the Cardinals? What kind of record do those two teams have together?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Yeah,
I don't think they were. I know they were in different divisions.
Different leagues or divisions?
Yeah.
That whole structure of it.
I know they've played over the years, but I don't know how often. I know that when the Cardinals are in Arizona, they produced that famous, the Bears and Cardinals game produced that famous rant from Dennis Green when he was the coach of the Cardinals, where they used it on one of the beer commercials, where they are what I said they are. Did you ever see that commercial?
Yeah.
So. But I have one of the guys who has coffee with us in the morning is 81, and he was a Cardinals fan, and he talks about going out to see him play at Comiskey, and I think I wonder if they played at Soldier at some point in time. That might have been their home at one time.
I don't think they did. I think at that time Soldier Field was set up for. It was like a multi-use.
Might have been over at Comiskey too.
Okay. Because I can remember. Do you remember when they used to have every year they played the Armed Forces game?
Oh yeah.
It was an exhibition game, and they took us as little leaguers out to Soldier Field to see. It was the Bears versus the Cardinals, but an exhibition action. So, I mean, I remember when Soldier Field was it set 80 or 100,000 at one time.
Yeah.
When it
Well,
was
original 150,000.
was 150.
Before the spaceship landed.
Well, another game
That's the
that was popular and then died because of the owners, NFL owners, was the All-Star game, college All-Star game. That was huge. That was the the college All-Stars against the NFL, the national champion, and then the coaches, when they started paying these players at big money, and they said, hey, my guys aren't going to be playing in that game and risk getting hurt.
That's true.
In a totally meaningless game.
Yeah.
So that put an end to the college All-Star game, but that was big. That used to sell out.
Yes.
Sell out there.
I tell you, once in a while, the All-Stars would actually win the game, and that was a
Yeah.
thrill and a
Oh,
half
yeah,
to see
yeah.
those guys win that
Yeah,
game.
right, right, they did. Yeah, a
Wasn't
couple
high
times.
school football very big at one time at Soldier Field?
Richard,
The Chicago
Yeah.
Prep Bowl. That's
The
I
Prep
think
Bowl.
the largest attendance ever at a high school
That's something.
football game.
I could tell you, I think the year would have been 60, I want to say it would be 68 or 69. I went to see Weber played CVS at Soldier Field in the Prep Bowl, and I think Soldier still sat about 80,000, and that place was full. It's packed. So, you know what? Go ahead, Tom. I'm sorry.
But Rich, I think we're ready for
I'm sorry.
for another break here.
You've been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians. We'll be back soon. Thank you.
Hello, friends. Do you need new tires for your vehicle? How are the brakes? Are they in good condition? How's your front wheel alignment? Do you need your tires rotated? How are the shocks and struts? Do you need an oil and grease change? How about a tune-up? When was the last time you had your engine tuned up? How about the wiper blades? Are they nice, sharp blades to clean off the rain and snow? How are the headlights, tail lights, stop lights, turn directional signals? Are all the bulbs working? How's your cooling system and the exhaust system? How about your battery? Does that need to be upgraded? How about the belts and hoses, fuel injectors, timing belt and chain, and the air conditioning? Is that all working properly? Well, if you need any maintenance work done on your vehicle, go to Grand Tire and Auto Service, which is located at 7034 West Grand Avenue in Chicago. They are on Grand Avenue on the north side of the street, about 2 blocks east of Harlem Avenue. You can't miss the building. There's a big Goodyear sign right on top of the building. Or you can call area code 773-622-4361. Don, Chris, or Ken will be more than happy to assist you and to help you with any questions you might have about the maintenance on your vehicle. Their hours are Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 7 o'clock in the evening. Saturday, from 7:30 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And even on Sunday, from 9:30 in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So once again, for any maintenance work you might need on your vehicle, go to Grand Tire and Auto Supply. Once again, their address is at 7034 West Grand Avenue in Chicago, about 2 blocks east of Harlem Avenue on the north side of the street. And their phone number is area code 773-622-4361. They have great service. Their mechanics are all certified mechanics, and they do quality work. Now, I've been going to Grand Tire with my vehicle since 1985, right up until this present day. So once again, Grand Tire and Auto Service at 7034 West Grand Avenue in Chicago. Their phone number is 773-622-4361. Don, Chris, and Ken will be more than happy to help you and to advise you on any maintenance work you might need on your vehicle. So once again, Grand Tire and Auto Service at 7034 Grand Avenue in Chicago, about 2 blocks east of Harlem Avenue on the north side of the street. You can't miss the building because there's a big Goodyear sign on the top of the building. That's Grand Tire and Auto Service, 7034 Grand Avenue in Chicago, and their phone number is area code 773-622-4361. For quality service, it's Grand Tire Auto Service, 7034 Grand Avenue in Chicago, 773-622-4361. You will be completely satisfied with the work that they do.
Now back to our special Meet the Chicago Historians broadcast from the Estelle Seed Community Center in Norwich. Tom?
All right, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for staying tuned. We're still on the subject of football. We're going to switch now from pro to college. And we are in the city of Chicago. Notre Dame. Notre Dame, Notre Dame, Notre Dame. They did a survey of the most beloved college football team and the most hated college football team. And guess who was number one on both lists?
Interesting.
Notre Dame. Beano Cook, a college football analyst, they asked him one time about classic college football rivalries, And he said, well, of course you have Army, Navy. You have Florida, Florida State. You have Alabama, Auburn. You have Southern Cal and UCLA. You have Arizona, Arizona State, Texas A&M, Michigan, Ohio State, and Notre Dame and anybody. And that is the truth about Notre Dame. You either love them or you hate them. I'm a Notre Dame fan. I wouldn't call myself a fanatic, but I am a Notre Dame fan. You know, supposedly this is a true story. People that had season tickets to Notre Dame, and naturally when you have season tickets in any stadium, you get to know the people surrounding you because usually the area is all season ticket holders. And there was a couple that got friendly with another couple seated directly behind them at Notre Dame. Notre Dame, Michigan, this couple is seated, and the husband comes and sits down, and they said, where's your wife? Everything okay? And he said, yeah, everything's fine. Was she going to be coming to the game? No. Well, why, anything wrong? No. My daughter's getting married today. They said, what? Your daughter's getting married today, and you're not at the wedding? He says, hey, I told her when she told me the date. That's Notre Dame, Michigan. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to make it. Supposedly that's a true story.
It's easy to believe.
Yeah. Was there ever much of a perception out there that if you're a Notre Dame fan, your team has a special connection to Pope and then to the man upstairs himself?
Well, of course, like they say, it's not a stadium, it's a shrine.
I tell you, I was a Notre Dame, not a Notre Dame fan for many years, and then I ended up one year went to the Notre Dame Navy game. Went with a group from a bar in Des Plaines, and I get there, and I'm wearing a floppy fisherman's hat, and I got a windbreaker on, and we're walking around the quad before the game, and they're selling different concessions, and I walk up. I was going to get a sandwich, and the gentleman said to me, young guy says to me, he says, "Can I help you, sir?" I'll tell you what, I was so impressed with the demeanor of the students and whatnot, the ones that I ran into there, because I was basically a young guy myself, but the respect that they showed people, and picked up a Notre Dame program, and saw at the time, I don't know if this stat is good anymore, but they claimed that 90%, over 90% of the students there were valedictorians or salutatorians. And I'm like, well, you know what? This is not a place to disrespect. This is a place to be for, because if you're for quality and you're for, good things, Notre Dame is about good things. So I actually changed my whole attitude about Notre Dame and became a fan.
Yeah, that's Notre Dame's a great school. Our regular moderator, Jack Ryan, he had two daughters that graduated from Notre Dame. Both very successful. There's a lot of misnomers about Notre Dame. Most people think that it's a huge school. As a matter of fact, if you ask someone, what's the largest Catholic university in the country, 9 times out of 10 you get Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a small school. How
long has it been a co-ed? I'm a little surprised that Notre Dame's quite traditional.
About 15 years or so, I'd say,
Really?
at least. It's been a while. And to answer what is the largest Catholic university, strangely enough, it's DePaul. Most people never guess DePaul, but DePaul's huge with all their different campuses.
I thought you were going to say Georgetown or something like that.
Yeah, well, Georgetown, I don't think they're that big either. But Notre Dame football, again, thinking about what actually put Notre Dame on the map, that movie, was it Newt Rockney All-American? Was that the name of the movie? Was that the famous line, "Let's win one for the Gipper"? Is that from that movie?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of put Notre Dame on the map. And other than that, and the fact that they they were winning. You know, Rich and I were talking on the break, and the true Notre Dame fan, if you don't win a national championship, it's a bad year. You know, if you go 8-2 or whatever, so what? You know.
Tom, I have to ask you a question. Do you like the current coach?
You know what? I liked him, like past tense, but I've got kind of mixed emotions about him now. He doesn't seem to be he doesn't seem to be all he was cracked up to be, and he gets a little volatile on the sidelines. You know, an analogy that I use about the rah-rah stuff, you know, coaches, you know, get out there and, you know, I'm a musician. I played in a lot of different bands, and I play with the bagpipes and drums, Chicago Police Department now. It would be the equivalent, you know, again, emotion, you can go a long way. You want to get your players fired up. But it would be the equivalent of getting a bunch of high school kids in a locker room, passing out instruments. You know, say, here's a trumpet for you, here's a trombone for you, you can have that drum. Okay, now I want you guys to get out there, and I want you to play those instruments. I want you to play that trombone like you've never played it before. And the kid's standing there with, nobody taught me how to play it. How am I supposed to? So you can use all the emotion you want, but if you don't have the basics, it's the classic story about guy watched the Wednesday night fights with his son, and he was an atheist. And the son used to see a Hispanic fighter before every round bless himself. And the son didn't know what it meant, so finally, after watching this guy a few times, he says, Dad, he says, that guy does this. He makes the sign of the cross before every round. He says, well, what does that mean? And his father said, son, if you can't box, it don't mean shit.
So true.
Yeah, and so getting back to the original question about Kelly, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think if they're not in the hunt for a national championship this coming year, he's going to be gone.
Yeah, you know what? Really, what you said about him, I sort of feel the same way. I had high hopes for him coming in. It really sort of has let me down in a couple. Me personally, I guess he doesn't care what I think, but he let me down in a couple areas. But I always say, Notre Dame to me. I say this about the Bears as well, and I'm not going to drift off onto the Bears.
There's a lot of Notre Dame Bear fans,
but
it goes hand in hand.
The point I would make: you bring in a Brian Kelly or you bring in a Matt Nagy, say, to jazz up the offense. The reality is, Notre Dame plays in South Bend, the Bears play in Chicago. You're going to have maybe a handful of games where the weather is going to be absolutely garbage. So you have this, fancy Dan offense that's going to be maybe not running the way it's supposed to because, when a guy is playing in 5 above 0 weather, he doesn't catch the ball as well, or the guy doesn't throw the ball as well. So my complaint has always been, you gotta prepare for both. I always say to my buddy Jim Leon, Notre Dame needs to come to Chicago and get some of those good big Catholic League linemen and just knock the snot out of people. You know what? I mean, I have nothing against the forward pass. It's entertaining. You need to have it in your offense. But Kelly, a guy like Kelly, is too reliant on that. And that's not, to me, that's not Notre Dame football. It's strong defense, good offensive linemen, and you just you stand up and you knock the snot out of the other guys.
Well,
here's another simplistic question. Is Notre Dame still an independent team, or did they now become part of the very enlarged Big Ten?
The football are still independent, as far as I know. Or did they join?
You know what? They joined the ACC in something, but I'm not sure if it was
basketball. They joined the league,
really
but football, I'm pretty
okay.
sure they're still independent.
They probably still are.
Well, talking about weather conditions affecting sports, there were, they do the polar bear plunge in Chicago. There were some guys sitting in a bar in Chicago, and they said, I don't really know if I want to go and do that, And one of the guys said, who was listening to them talk, he says, "You guys," he said, "what a bunch of wusses." He says, "I'm going to tell you," he says, "every February, it didn't matter what the weather conditions were." He says, "We went and we threw ourselves right into the water. I don't care what it was. Every February we did it. You guys are a bunch of wusses." And they go, "Where are you from?" He said, "Honolulu."
I guess there was never a game, professional or college, called because of the weather, even though you couldn't see anything.
I can't think of. I think there's been some delayed. Well, I know in the NFL, or I think in the NCAA too, if there's a lightning strike,
lightning
strike,
That-
they'll postpone the game, but they won't cancel it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, that's true. It's lightning will put them off the field for even the pros. I mean, I think if you get lightning
Well, that's
and you
very
got
smart.
you got to get them off.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, in the short time we have left, we got pro, college. Let's touch on high school. And Chicago is a great area for high school. Chicago Catholic League, and I was involved in it at St. Rita. Is arguably one of the greatest high school football leagues in the country. The state playoff system started, and a very interesting thing. A lot of people don't know this. The IHSA, Illinois High School Athletic Association, they did something to. Well, they don't say Catholic schools; they call them schools without recruiting boundaries. A team like St. Rita that has an enrollment of, let's just say, 800, they are playing in the playoffs, are playing schools with an enrollment of 2,500. And people find that hard to believe, and the reason they did that is because the IHSA, if you are an all-male school, they automatically double your enrollment. So that takes St. Rita, let's just say, from 800 to 1,600. And then they're not done with that. Then they multiply your enrollment by 1.6, I believe. How they came up with that figure, I don't know. And that's kind of like to handicap, again, schools without recruiting boundaries, Catholic schools, from dominate, but they still pretty much dominate all the different divisions. The IHSA is basically run by downstaters, the way they factor it out. And downstate, they do not like the city of Chicago.
yeah, you know what? Now the mayor was a little blunt about Springfield. I'll be blunt about the IHSA. I mean, to me, it's a corrupt organization. I have a friend who's the AD at Montini. And Montini, I want to say, I may be off a little bit, but I'm not too far off, has an enrollment of, let's say, between 600 and 800.
Right, yeah.
They're co-ed.
Yeah, that's.
And now the factors that Tom mentioned don't come into play for them because they are, not all male. But what they've done now, because Montini has won the state championship in football so often, and they've also won the state championship in girls basketball. They've been very successful in wrestling. So they've taken and bumped them up into higher classifications. I want to say right now in football they're 7A, and you're talking about a school between 600 and 800 competing against schools of probably 1,500 to 2,000 students. I remember we were doing the Ridgewood football games on radio for WRHS. And Elmwood Park one year, which is in our conference, was the conference champions. And they had a nice team. They had a nice year. They were 7-2. So Jim and I are talking on the air, and Jim says, well, Elmwood Park 7-2, they might get a good seed. And I said, that ain't happening, Jim. He goes, what are you talking about? They're 7-2. They're conference champs. I go, not going to happen. I'm going to tell you right now, when they do the draw on Saturday night, Elmwood Park's going to get, pardon my language, screwed. So they do the draw on Saturday night. Elmwood Park got Joliet Catholic to start off. I go, are you kidding me? Joliet Catholic. So to me, IHSA is corrupt. That's all I could say about
Well,
it.
I have to agree with you, and the reason for that is every year, they used to do it in the first round pairing, and it was so blatantly obvious, so now they do it in the second pairing, but if you get two strong teams, again, a team I'm familiar with, St. Rita, and also Mount Carmel, two schools that in certain years probably should have been playing for the state championship themselves, they make sure that they match them.
True.
So one of them, match them together in the second round, so one of them is going to get knocked out. Because if things were fair, like I'd say, and they seeded them properly, they probably wind up as, playing for the state championship, and they don't want. The nightmare to the IHSA is two Chicago, especially Catholic schools,
Sure. They don't
playing
want
for the
that.
state championship. Like I said, if I tell people about the state of Illinois and how much they dislike the Chicago area. I was on, when I was still on the job, I was on the state of Illinois Accident Reconstruction Advisory Board, and we used to meet. There were police from all over the state, and there was one of the board members was always someone from the state police. And they always had something negative to say about Chicago. I used to tell them, I said, be careful what you say about Chicago, because we might decide to move the city of Chicago out of Illinois, and then Illinois will be another Iowa.
Yeah. That's
Was
true.
Fenwick often a strong competitor?
Oh yeah, Fenwick.
Were they really?
Yeah,
I thought
yeah,
I'd heard of them.
Yeah, Fenwick was good. They were off. They were off for a few years. When I was in high school, they were right up. They were off for a few years, but they're back. I'd say they're back now.
Actually, a friend of mine is their head coach. Gene Nudo was the coach at. He was a coach at Driscoll when Driscoll got their run of state championships going. He was there for the first one. Then he worked in the Arena League for the Arizona Wranglers. He actually was the president of the Chicago Rush, and then when the Rush folded, he came into the fold for Fenwick. And one time I'm on the phone with Gino. I said, Gene, you're not a teacher. I mean, he's not a certified teacher or any kind of teacher. He's a football coach. I said, so how are they paying you? He says, and you know what? I'm not saying this to fault the Catholic League. I think the Catholic League does things the common sense way. He is in charge of going out and getting funding. That's the job that pays the majority of whatever his salary is. I mean, a football coach, if you're a public league coach and you're on a salary schedule, a public league football coach, I'm not saying Chicago Public League, but in the suburbs, you're probably making $7,000 to $10,000 as the head coach, and the rest of your teaching salary. Well, in this case, I mean, Gino's not a teacher, so they pay him whatever they pay him, and they I'm not going to say make up a job for him, but they give him other duties. And to me, it's common sense. There's a guy, Danny Galante. I think it's Danny. Yeah, Galante is the head coach at St. Pat's. And when my son was ready to go into high school, he wanted to go to St. Pat's really badly. And so I had an opportunity to meet Danny, and he met my son and I. He was out watching a Little League game at the Norwich Park. So I would say probably 3-4 months in between seeing Danny and talking to him, and I only met him once. I call St. Pat's in January and want to talk to Coach Galante. He wasn't in. He'll return your call. I'm thinking, okay, I've heard that before. Within an hour, Danny Galante he returned my call. I told him who I was. He says, yeah, I remember. I met you over at Norwich Park. I mean, this is what the Catholic League does. They sell their product, if that's the way you want to put it. I'm not saying it's perfect, but they cross as many T's and dot as many I's as they can. To me, the public schools their attitude is like this. We're going to get you anyway. But the Catholic schools got to go out and sell themselves. That's the bottom line, and they do a great job.
Yeah, definitely. On the southwest side, you have St. Rita, Brother Rice, Mount Carmel, St. Lawrence, Marist, all recruiting the same area to get the same kids.
Sure. Sure. Well, Glenn Kozlowski came in to coach the Guerin football team. And Guerin is in the same conference as Ridgewood. And I was talking to the Ridgewood AD, and he goes, we're worried, that Guerin's going to start recruiting. So I'm out with Tommy Lentine, my buddy, who's the AD at Montini, and I mentioned this to him, and he started laughing. I go, what are you laughing at, Tom? He says, Rich, think about this. Okay, Montini's in Lombard or wherever they're at. Say we want to get a kid from Melrose Park to come to Montini. He's not even a football. He or she is not an athlete. This is just a student. You have to convince these people that the right thing to do is spend 10 grand or whatever. He goes, we recruit every kid. He goes, what is he talking about? I don't care if the kid never plays a sport, plays an instrument, whatever. He's a student there. He's there every day as a student. That's all he does. We have to recruit every kid.
Right, that's absolutely correct, whether he's an athlete or not, because the competition, because they got to keep their doors open.
Yes, definitely. So, and I was like, yeah, Tom, that's right. That's for sure.
Now, back in my day, Chicago Public School, I went to Steinmetz, late 50s, early 60s. Either it would be Austin, Steinmetz, maybe Schurz once in a while. You never heard of Taft, but didn't they kind of switch in and out of the leagues very often based upon their enrollment size or their previous record? There was a lot of comings and goings, it seems to me, in the old Chicago high school, who they played who. A-League, B-League,
teams, Austin was a powerhouse for a while. In my high school, the big, because Rita played CVS in the Prep Bowl in '64. CVS and Lane were the two big powerhouses.
Lane would be a big one, yeah.
In my high school days. Now you've got Simeon, who came out of the weeds in the middle of nowhere. Again, it's hard to believe that all of a sudden all these great football players are living in the district, Simeon's district.
Well, Tom, do you ever read, or Rich, either one of you? I read the sports section in the Sun-Times every day, and during high school season, they'll have a high school column once a week. And these guys who write high school sports, what I thought you were going to say, Tom, about Simeon, and it's true, or it's been true of other schools as well. You'll read the guy who writes the high school column, right? And he'll say, this player is going to transfer to this school, maybe from a Chicago school to a suburb or a suburb school to Chicago. And they write they write about it as if you're talking about professionals who are going to go from one team to another as a free agent.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here saying, wait a minute, the IHSA has rules about a person who participates in sports transferring and when they're eligible. And you're writing about it as if this guy is going to go from school A to school B, and he's going to walk right in and play. And finally, after a couple of years of reading this garbage, I think it was the Catholic League coaches, which the Catholic League are the schools who usually get burnt by this, finally complained. They said, when are you going to start to enforce the rules? I mean, if this person jumps from this school to this school, at least when I was in school, you sat out a year.
Right. Yeah.
You sat out that season, that whatever sport you were transferring for, because that's what they're transferring to go to a better program. And it's BS.
And not only that, you have to be an official resident of that area.
You're supposed to be.
So your whole family is going to move from the northwest side of the city to the south side.
You know what? They talk about the Chicago public schools getting the bad end of the stick. They manipulate the system like nobody's business. It's pathetic.
Yeah.
Really.
Who has the better record overall by, let's say, public versus parochial schools in the high school system? Is there one lopsided, or has it been pretty even over the years? I just don't know.
Catholic schools pretty much dominated.
Do they?
Years. It's like the Prep Bowl, for years.
That's good.
Yeah, football it's usually the Catholic League, and basketball it's the public league, I would say.
That's an interesting stuff.
And the other sports are actually pretty irrelevant, so, I mean, really, so.
Well, it looks like we're winding down to the end of our segment and the end of our show.
We wish to thank Kevin of Jack FM, WRHS 89.7 FM, for broadcasting our shows over the Ridgewood Radio Network. Recordings of previous Meet the Chicago Historians program are available for your listening pleasure via the internet at www.windycityhometown.com. A special thank you to the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, John Seconda. On behalf of everyone associated with our Meet the Chicagoans program, we thank you. And this is your announcer, Rich Lang. So long until next time. Thanks again for listening.
And on behalf of our regular moderator, Jack Ryan, history is more than a book on the shelf.
Any information on
You have been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians from the Stella Seib Community Center at 4000 North Ozark Avenue in Norwich, Illinois, on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich on Monday, August the 6th, the year 2018. We want to give special thanks to Joanna and Rich Massaro for allowing us to come to this community center to broadcast our program. We also want to give thanks to our remote setup crew, Mr. Oscar Ramirez and James Rohde. This program was produced by Tom McKenna, directed by John DeVita, and our audio engineer today was James Rohde. And radio station manager Kevin Zeflik at WRHS FM Norwich, and the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, Mr. John Seconda. This program was pre-recorded on Monday, August the 6th, year 2018. Until next time, friends, please be safe and thanks for listening.